The Imperium in Warhammer 40,000 is almost always associated with a neo-Gothic aesthetic, plus a few thousand skulls roaming around and in the walls in order to show that the universe and their faction has regressed to this parody of progress, and that the universe is simply not a great place to live in for the most part. Alternatively, we see with the Imperial Guard, there's still the skulls, but there's much more of a hyper-industrialized aesthetic of the Second World War on steroids, simply attempting to survive the ordeal they find themselves in as of current moment, besieged from all sides. Yet, this is not the only aesthetics that we have that have been emphasized and shows the dystopia of the 41st millennium in the Imperium, and it relatively has been looked over by Games Workshop for many years until it was revived around 5 years back. Of course, I'm talking about the one, the only, Necromunda. The game is set on the hive world of the same name as the game system, a skirmish game where the action happens well below the surface and away from prying eyes, while all of the gangs exude this attitude of punk. The Escher gang, simply put, has an air of a truly exotic and wild gang of punks. To this end, I decided to go with a mother color for this project. For everyone who does not know what a mother color is, simply put, it is a color as a base which is then added to every color used in order to create a harmony in this composition. To this end, I decided to go with orange because it is a nice, bright, and vibrant color, which makes everything go pop. The only exception to this were the metallic bits for fairly obvious reasons. I made the mixture of a bright, vibrant orange by putting 2 parts Hansa yellow and 1 part cadmium red from a Liquitex soft body acrylic set I have. The other reason I want to have a mother color was because I was very curious to see how it would modulate the other colors and interact with them, especially since these are Liquitex paints, and so they're pure pigments and not a mixture of various pigments in their paints, causing them to be inherently more vibrant and to allow me to see easier what really happens when paints mix, because often a single pot of paint is comprised of 3 or 4 pigments in various ratios, causing it to be quite dull whenever it comes out of the pot and onto the palette, therefore causing several thin layers to be applied instead of 2 or 3. I really wanted these to stick out and not just be another copy pasted paint scheme which would be well identifiable. At the same time, I didn't want to go too far outside my comfort zone, and there was a conscious effort for this not to be super intricate and overly complicated. The thing that I focused on is, one, to keep it simple, and the other was to simply use color theory to get the best bang for my buck in this regard. Despite Necromunda being set in the deep, dark Underhive, in all honesty, there are some pretty vibrant paint schemes for some of the gangs, both Escher and Goliath respectively, which is really nice since it would have been easy for GW to give them more drab color schemes to be more with the times. Instead, they didn't and went something more akin to the original schemes, something that they probably are not going to keep on doing, seeing with what they're doing with Ash Wastes at the moment. I mean, if you want to, go with the more drab stuff. There's always Orlok or Delacque for you to choose from. Speaking of official paint schemes, something that I noticed is the excessive amount of paint required in order to have the official look on the box art was just stupidly too much. I do not think that it should be that it's a good way for them to actually give people guides, because it's honestly probably just a way for GW to get people to buy more paints that they really don't need. Although I guess since Necromunda is a specialist game, you buy less overall. They're trying to still make as much money off of your average consumer as they would if they were buying into a main game like 40K or Age of Sigmar, where there's a definite more significant investment in models and paints. Yeah, and there's going to be expansions for the games, but people really aren't required to buy the expansions in order to keep up to date with stuff. And really, I don't like it. I think that it's kind of predatory, and I'm just gonna say it now. Although, switching back to theory, Mother Color is also great because it adds unity in all of the paints you decide to use. I decided on orange despite it being a secondary color because it can be used to both tint and shade pretty easily. In addition, it is an easy color to transition from dark to light and warm to cool. I do admit I am not entirely adopting a harmonious paint scheme as well because I want to push the limits of a mother color, since oftentimes we do not see what a single principle does in isolation. For example, if you see a painting, it is usually not just one element or aspect on display. Artists usually use a whole bunch of elements like perspective, line control, rendering, and the like. However, I wanted to see where just using a mother color got me in terms of attempting to tie the visual elements together. In part, I knew that this was going to be a little off of a disaster going in, since restraint is often a better solution for successfully working with color. The thing is, what matters more than the raw colors you used is also what values they are used as well. For example, if you were to go and paint a green and red both at the same value, take a photo into a grayscale image, then it would basically be the same color. This is a common issue with rookie painters of all stripes because there is not recognition of what probably is the greatest tool in their box, and that is using contrast. There has to be both the use of hues and a harmony to the overall mood of the piece one decides to make. It is entirely possible to paint a piece with the same color but with different values in hues and make it be an eye-catching work as well. In the end, these techniques have to be taken for what they are in reality, which are tools and a means to an end. We often believe that these techniques are going to be somehow a surefire way for us to magically improve our painting game. Although, in all fairness, this is what happens to a good chunk of content creators on this platform, in which they highlight a certain method or technique of doing something, and then magically they produce results that a beginner cannot do. At the same time, these people are also entertainers for the most part, and they're not actual formal teachers. Another thing that we often blur the line in all of this is both between entertainer and instructor. It does not matter if they are corporate or independent miniature painters as well. In order to really get this sense of how a technique is supposed to be applied, you need a demonstration with commentary. In any formal art class, an art student will know this to be the case, and then during studio time while the students draw or paint or whatever, the instructor will float around and observe and help the students. This is why the DIY method of painting, and really art in general, does not work well in my opinion. There needs to be some form of critique and feedback. However, what is magic to me, at least, are the oil washes. I wash the oil parts with Albuturing 502's engine grease, and then wait around 30 minutes, and then removed the excess with some mineral spirits. And honestly, it is probably one of the coolest effects I have seen, and it is really magic in a tube. Mind you, it also comes pre-thinned. All I had to do was just apply it in a fairly liberal fashion, and then wait for it to dry before getting rid of the excess. This is probably the most unnecessary part of the process, although it did give a nice effect on the metallic parts, which is a plus. Also, something that is not really expounded upon in the lore of the series, but is a real thing. While there are a set number of gangs, there are also sub-factions within the gangs. So it's kind of like Space Marine chapters, guard regiments, Talseps, and all of that good stuff. Or really any other faction in the main game of 40k. And not just there's simply one way of painting one gang. Since this is a specialist game, it is not well publicized. Oh well. The final thing I did was by using a Mia black liner, I went and got all the various crevices on the miniature in order to make the contrast stick out more. See, the thing is that while darker colors do work well to create a gradient, using black as a means to recess shades makes this a clear and definite definition for the individual parts. It is a bit messy on smaller miniatures, and so this means that you will either need to wipe up the excess, or your paint job will be a bit stained, or need another coat of paint to bring out the highlights again. The details on the various parts of the miniature's bodies was honestly fine. Usually I am a bit critical of this practice. However, due to this being a skirmish level game, these details are a bit more understandable, while a Primaris Intercessor might have 10 little bits and bobs for simply being bits and bobs that no one really pays attention to during the game itself. The accessories make sense for the gang members, as well as these little communication devices and the feathers instead of having just pistols and holsters and grenades, and then some other details here and there. Too many accessories can and will slow down your motivation for basic troops. It is better to save any of these for more elite style troops and characters, especially if there are less of them in a unit. By the same turn, all of these miniatures are characters. Your gang should have personality, and at the same time, these being the basic version of the gang, should probably have some restraint, and only after earning their stripes really try to go to town, because they might not make it out. The narrative needs to inform the paint job and not the other way around, eyes bigger than the stomach and all that. In the end, I really did enjoy this project. However, it also taught me the importance of not relying on one singular technique to make something stand out in a particular fashion. Don't get me wrong, there are pretty cool miniatures, and at the same time, I would not really want to enter them into a contest of any sort. There needs to be more variation and value on the parts of the armor and cloth for it really to stand out if it were to stand out in a competition, if I was intending that to be the case. The unpainted parts were intentionally done, but it's kind of hit or miss in my opinion. Although in the end, I am happy with it, and I will be putting these on the tabletop whenever I get the chance to play some Necromunda. Before you go, don't forget to please like, comment, and subscribe. Anyways, this is Frontiers Horizon signing off, and until next time, stay frosty.